guys been we've been seeing in the news this incredible amount of media of death and children and just women and bombardments, and it's all about Ghouta. We are not covering anything else. So first of all, I would like for you to explain the people what happened with Ghouta, when was this taken, how long ago was under occupation, and which of the occupations, so we can give them a little bit of understanding, because most people have no idea what happened.
First of all, the mainstream media always deals with the issue of Ghouta or any other area that is out of the control of the government only from the humanitarian angle. The issue of Ghouta is political and it's military issue more than a humanitarian issue if we want to check why these governments are trying to prevent the Syrian government to retake Ghouta. First of all, Ghouta, since more than 4 years, it was out of the control of the government, the Eastern Ghouta, and it was the forefront of the military rebellion against the Syrian government. When we say a rebellion, that means these people rebelled with arms against the Syrian government. It wasn't a peaceful, democratic, let's say, protest. They weren't calling for, let's say, equality. They weren't calling for democracy. They weren't calling for women's rights or etc. They were calling for an Islamic state. As simple as that. The people were those who were carried the weapons in 4 years ago. They called for the Sharia to be implemented in this part of Damascus, which is only few kilometers in the north of Damascus, and it's also on the highway that connects Damascus to Homs. Who supported this rebellion in Eastern Ghouta can explain the nature of the rebellion. First of all, Ghouta is now controlled by different military factions. Some of them are supported by Saudi Arabia, and others are by Turkey and Qatar. For example, we have Al-Nusra Front, we have Ahrar al-Sham, and we have Islam's Army. Islam's Army is directly, just check, if you check the names, the brands of these armed groups, we understand that they are Islamic groups. But the core of the ideology of these groups are Salafi Islamist. When we say Islamist, we are not saying that they are Islamic or Muslim groups, because these Islamist groups, they are not only trying to live in an Islamic way, they are trying to impose the Islamic way on other Syrians, which is in Syria.
We are just really in this, please don't lose your train of thought over here, because it's very, very important that people in Latin America that are following us, that don't understand. I want you to just understand what he said, that 4 years ago when Ghouta was taken, it was taken by extremist groups already. The Sharia law, it is, if you can also explain really quick what is the Sharia law exactly, so they understand, especially women, that we have a lot of women that are watching. En español, hace 4 años empezó esto en Ghouta, entonces empezaron a marchar los extremistas. Hace 4 años no había presencia del gobierno, there was no presence of the government. So continue on this, and we're talking about the different terrorist groups that have been supporting these rebellions
yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So regional governments such as Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey were supporting these groups, and these groups were trying to implement the Sharia laws. When we say the Sharia laws, that means the way that Saudi Arabia's society is governed now. That means the harshest interpretation of the Quran, the Sharias, the laws of the Islamic rules, the ahadith. When we say the ahadith, that means what the Prophet Muhammad said to his followers, for example, or his friends. But there are different interpretations for what the Prophet said 14 centuries ago. And Saudi Arabia and the scholars in Saudi Arabia, they interpreted it in a very, very radical way, and they make the living of the people, and especially women, as not only a second-class citizen, but as an animal. I'm sorry to compare this to animals, because in some countries, they treat the animals in a very harsh way, and they believe they don't have rights. And these people are treating women the way they treat the animals. So in Syria, we are a secular society, let's say. The people are, there is a coexistence between the different communities in Syria. The people should know that in Syria we have over 20 different ethnicities and different religious sects. And these communities were living in harmony together without killing each other or without attacking each other. In contrary, they were coexisting together, and in many cases they were intermarrying together. So Syria was one of the examples of the perfect examples of coexistence in the Middle East. This is not my words. This is also, if we check the statements of the Western politicians before the war, they were taking Syria as an example of coexistence in the Middle East, especially the statements that were coming from Germany, especially by Steinmeier. But after the war, and because of geopolitical reasons, not because President Bashar Assad was, whether was elected in a democratic way or not, because of geopolitical reasons, because what Syria represents in the Middle East as a growing regional power, allied with Iran, allied with Russia, and saying no to the United States, to America. It says no to the war in Iraq. It says no to the occupation of Palestine. It says no to the occupation of Lebanon. And it says no to the occupation of our lands by Israel. So